So, John, I've really been enjoying your podcast series, Great Minds on Learning, where you and Donald Clark explore learning theorists and the influence they've had on learning theory. I have to say, I listened to one the other day, Pragmatism and Practice is probably the best learning podcast that I've ever heard. And I think the reasons behind that are that for learning professionals, there's so much to take away in terms of improving the effectiveness of your learning delivery. And also as an individual, lots of things in there to help you optimize your learning strategies. But also it's fascinating. And as a bit of a history geek, I found it really, really interesting as you kind of really dig deep into the subject matter. So I'm interested to know, what did you learn in bringing together your Great Minds on Learning podcast?
Yes, well, it's early days of my learning journey. I should say that we have, it's based on a series of blogs that Donald did on the individual theorists. We're grouping them together, sort of 5 or 6 at a time, cognitivists, behaviorists, and so on. And there's a way to go yet because he covered so many, as you know, and we projected about 4 seasons. But Donald keeps writing extra blogs and adding new theorists, so it may go up to 5 seasons. We're halfway through the first one, so I say it's kind of early days. And one of the things I'm finding out is how much I didn't know. So I feel more and more cautious about saying anything about learning theory. It makes me think back on past blogs that I've written about learning, and I have to admit I kind of regret a few of them. One thing that strikes me is just how much science there is in it. Originally I balked at the term learning science when you were banding it around so much, Carl, sorry. Because I felt, there's a slight amount of hyperbole in there, perhaps, because perhaps it's not all that fixed. But in fact, there is a lot of science there. I've learned about the roots of experimental psychology, its development in the 20th century, and how it diverged from clinical psychiatry in the beginning of the 20th century. And, William James is a very important figure who's in the last episode. He spans sort of both those worlds. He corresponded with Jung and Freud, and yet it's the experimental, pragmatical basis of his approach helped to form the field of experimental psychology. So learning science is a real thing. It is real science. And a lot leads on from that in terms of how seriously we should take it. Some puzzling things that have come up for me. I'm currently working on a white paper about space practice based on an earlier white paper that Donald did. And we covered a lot of the science behind this in the latest podcast. And I'm quite kind of surprised about how little it's implemented. So to summarize it, people who haven't seen that podcast, it turns out quite counterintuitively that all the learning really happens after the learning event. So we focus on content, events, workshops, 3-day residential leadership courses, not you see many of those anymore, as being where learning happens. But in actual fact, science says something else. It says it happens afterwards when you're actively trying to recall things you've learned or trying to put them into practice. So right now, I'm learning more about Great Minds on Learning because I'm actively trying to recall what I learned than when I was listening to Donald talking about it.